Thank you guys so much for joining me. My name is Sienna Forrest. I'm here with my partner, Tina Christensen. Together, we are Oops, Minnesota. And I'm so happy today that we have Carson Rose Schneider joining us, Dr. Carson Rose Schneider. She graduated with her doctorate in collaborative piano and coaching in 2017 from University of Minnesota. And currently, she lives in Maple Grove. She and her husband bought a house a little while ago, and she is starting up a home studio. Carson kind of does it all in regards to the piano. She coaches, she teaches, she music directs, and now she's getting into the recording business side of things. So we're really excited to have her here with us today. Oh, she also is a pianist and choir accompanist at the Union Congregational Church in Elk River, Minnesota. So she literally does it all. Art song, secular music, religious. I mean, put a piano in front of her and Carson will take care of it. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with both of you.
So I think we're all really curious how you got started in your career as a pianist and how you found your way into opera.
Well, the initial story is actually really quite funny. I started piano when I was 8, and it actually grew out of this competition with my brother. We're only 2 years apart, and basically, if it could be turned into a competition, we would make it one. We fought over just about everything, but we're much closer now that we're a little older, So I think I'd gone away to like some arts music camp for a summer, and I'd come back, and I wasn't even like at the camp for piano at that point. It was more just like arts, like drawing, something non-music related, because I would feel sorry for my neighbor friends who had to practice anything for 30 minutes. But anyway, I came home one summer and like my brother had picked up piano because I don't know, he got it into his head that he wanted to be Elton John. And that's funny too, because now he actually kind of is. But so it took a little bit for me to actually get into it, but I thought it was really cool that he had this digital keyboard that could do, that could make all these sounds and everything. And he was studying with some local teacher at a music school, kind of like Schmidt. This was in Pennsylvania. And so I told my parents that I had to take piano lessons too. And so for a while, Kurt and I were actually going to the same teacher for like a year. And then Kurt wanted to quit when he realized that he had to actually sit down and practice quite a bit before he could really be Elton John at the piano. He quit and replaced it with chess. And I wanted to quit, but I didn't know at the time what I wanted to replace it with. And my parents raised us with this idea that we had to do one thing outside of school, like any kind of discipline. That was non-school related. And I didn't really know what that was. And so mom very diplomatically told me, like, all right, well, stick with it for one more year and then go from there. And so I did. And kind of the rest is history. Like I sort of fell in love with it on my own. And I found like a more serious teacher. And I even had some opportunities to like play with choir in middle school. And I had some kind of really early introductory collaborative piano experiences that kind of showed me at a fairly young age what all was out there. But I didn't really know what to do, or how to pursue that or opera until much later, until my master's.
So you mentioned that you hated the idea of practicing at a young age. Why did you hate that and how did you grow to like it? Because you don't become a great pianist without, sitting your butt down and doing the work.
No, this is true. Especially like solo pianists have this reputation of like literally practicing like 8 hours or more. And I don't know. I think to me, it just seemed like they were chained to the piano, like they had to practice. And I hated practicing as a kid. Like I would leave it until the very last thing in the day, thinking that my parents would somehow like forget that I hadn't practiced. But it would be like, I don't know, probably a reasonable hour. Like after dinner, mom would be like, have you practiced your 30 minutes today? I don't think you have. You better like, sit your butt down there and practice. I think, honestly, it's because like a lot of teachers, when you're that young, I mean, you're not really being taught how to practice. Honestly, I didn't even really know myself how to practice until, I don't know, even senior year of undergrad. Like I thought I knew how to practice, but I mean, one lesson, 30 minutes a week is like really not that much time. And so I think probably it took until I had a better understanding of like the mechanics of my body at the piano and how I needed to take apart the music. And that didn't happen for me until I was a lot older. Now I love practicing. So I think that's kind of the secret. You have to kind of figure out how to practice. And it's kind of surprising how little that's taught.
Yeah, Tina and I have talked about that independently before, that is like the one area that is totally glossed over, but it is the fundamental thing. It's like not learning how to add and then expecting people to do calculus.
Right. It's like playing a few scales is not teaching yourself how to practice.
Well, as a singer too, it's let's go and sing the thing that feels the best to sing. It's usually like the loudest and the highest, the thing that is fun. And those runs, like I'll get to them. Like I'll learn those at some point. And they go so fast, like no one will even hear what the notes are.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where you start out. So it's I think that's really great too that your parents held you to that standard too and made sure that you were doing the things that you said you would do. It's a really great example.
They sure tried. They would even say, I think you're practicing that too fast. Like, slow it down. And I would hate that as a kid. Like, I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone. Of course, they were right.
Were they musical themselves?
Actually, yes. My mom sings still, and she wasn't formally trained. She's an artist, but she sang in choirs and has a really pretty voice, actually. I think music runs more so on my dad's side of the family. So my grandmother was a violinist, and so my father played flute. I think he still does play the flute. So music runs very deep in our family. I think like I'm kind of the first one who pursued it seriously, like from the classical side. And my brother Kurt is a famous YouTuber in kind of the pop world. So we kind of have everything.
Got it all covered.
Yeah.
Well, speaking about this being, this a tough competitive career, what is it that keeps you going? And I know that the collaborative track is a little bit different from other people. So do you want to talk a little bit about why you chose that and what keeps you pushing through?
That's a great question. I feel like it kind of chose me in a way, because I think I knew even in my undergrad that the tough, grueling, competitive lifestyle of a classical, like solo pianist was not going to be for me. But in your undergrad, it's like, they just kind of want you to practice and work on yourself, which was great for me at the time because that's what I needed. But also, it didn't necessarily prepare me to like pick and specialize from there. So when I got to my master's, I did my master's at Wisconsin-Madison. The really nice thing about that program for me was that you could kind of do like a dual degree in solo piano and chamber music. So I hadn't even played with like my first singer until, let me think now, I think it was like the first year of my master's when I started playing with singers. So not really that long ago in the big scheme of things. And I put together this chamber music recital and had to do a solo recital. And for me, that was kind of like, okay, I think this is what I want to do, but like, how do I do it? And then in the summer between my 2 years as a master's student, I needed some way to make money and I wanted to stay in Madison. And I got hired to be a rehearsal pianist for a Gilbert and Sullivan company. And that was my first time ever playing operetta, anything opera. And I really loved it. It was so much fun to get to be a whole orchestra and just to not be by yourself all the time. I think what really keeps me going is just being around the creativity and artistry of so many other people, getting to work with so many other people and to really help and support them too. So I took 3 years off to kind of figure out what I wanted to do and worked in like a variety of different capacities. Because it was even like when I was a staff accompanist in Eastern Kentucky University, I got to play with voice studios. And I got this whole other training and insight into what even a coach was, which is kind of funny. It's like, it's still a pretty new thing, I think. So at least it wasn't something that was ever presented to me as something that was even an option that you could do. So it was like this whole other world that I even realized was out there.
Yeah, I don't think people understand there's a difference between a voice teacher and a coach. And if you go to a voice teacher, they'll talk to you about the technical aspects of singing, like how to physically produce the sounds. They're like a sounding board for you. Like, I'm seeing you do this with your body. That's sort of their purview. But then when you work with a coach, there are all these other things that need to be addressed in repertoire, like the language, the style, tempi even. I mean, there's so much acting. And so for you then, as a pianist, besides playing the piano beautifully and collaborating, you also have to have a working knowledge then of languages and styles of music, historical practices, all that. So that's a whole nother journey of learning experience that you go on.
Yes, it's like I get to be a student for life. And a secondary singer. I think like when I was a girl, I was like, oh man, if I had a different like personality or drive or whatever, it would have been great, great to be an actress. Or I think maybe in the back of my head, I wanted to be a singer. So this way I get to kind of do it from the piano though. So
We did Lyric Opera of the North, the outreach tour. You had a line. You had an acting part in that show. So you are living your dream.
I would argue that you act from the piano, which sounds cheesy as heck, but it's true. Like you and I had planned an art song recital that got canceled because of COVID, unfortunately. And I mean, the piano, especially in art song, is a character unto itself. And it was so much fun for me to explore that music with you because of course I had an idea of what it should be like in my mind, and you had another idea or just another interpretation, and it's not like one canceled the other out. It's you layer them on top of each other and suddenly it has so much more depth and so much more character and so much more meaning. So I would argue you do a very lovely job of acting from the piano.
I love doing that kind of thing. I feel like that's something that's missing from a lot of more like soloist trained instrumentalists. They don't often approach music that way. Sometimes that's not necessarily the case, but I think it probably depends on how you're taught to approach the music from your teacher.
And I think also the coaches that you work with, because I know there are some wonderful ones here in town that I've worked with too, and they have such different approaches to how you work on the music. So I know that you've worked quite a bit with Eric McEnany, and he's a really, really wonderful coach as well.
He is. I love the way he talks about language and like the character of language, and how it can set the mood of what you're singing, and how the mood of what you're singing can interpret how you articulate the language. It adds so much.
Yeah, I like his approach of asking questions too, and not necessarily looking for a right or wrong answer like you were saying, Tina, working with Carson, but just making a choice about it and looking for those details so it's a more complete, informed performance. It's really wonderful.
I would say when I coach, I use coaches for different things. Like there is my go-to coach for the details, like somebody who I know is going to hold me accountable. Like you're getting to that downbeat late, let's fix this. Or like this vowel isn't quite right, let's adjust it. Get all those micro things. And then there are the coaches like Eric McEnany who lead you to a point and say, a choice needs to be made here. What is that choice? Let's explore the questions, and then you come up with the answer on your own. So in your own coaching, Carson, which direction would you say you go? Or is it like a combination of both?
That's such a great question. I feel like for me, it's a combination of both depending on what the singer needs. I love working with young singers who have never even experienced working with a pianist coach before. And often they do need nuts and bolts, especially if their professor is not providing them. I mean, I feel like as a coach, there's a way that you can do it without it being like you're giving them a voice lesson. So I kind of enjoy the challenge there. But also, I do kind of think that if you approach something from a more character perspective, that often helps the nuts and bolts align. And you haven't kind of made it this psychological thing for your singer. So I feel like for me, that's the more compelling way to approach music, usually. Unless like they really want some kind of like nuts and bolts explanation for something like, oh, you need to be aligning in this way before this hard part. Like that's why that's not working. But often I find that giving them a character idea will kind of fix that for them without them even really knowing that that's what's happening. So for me, that's kind of where the magic lies in coaching.
I've experienced that as well, that going into the character kind of releases some vocal things that you've gotten hung up on. So you recorded with Kara Morgan for us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the repertoire that you chose?
One of the things I love doing the most is curating programs. And it's so interesting, like as a collaborative pianist, we don't often get the chance to do that. More of the time what happens is people bring projects to us, which I love because it keeps things so diverse. But I also love getting the chance to do it just with a totally blank slate. So Kara and I like had a totally blank slate, the two of us going into this project. We knew we wanted to do art song that was kind of underrepresented. But I also wanted to approach it with this idea of doing underrepresented art song with like more kind of standard art song or composers instead of trying to make it like the separation. Because I feel like the two can very much coexist in the same program and it can still be a lovely program. And so we actually curated the program together. me and Kara from the beginning, which was really fun. There's so much music out there. I mean, we all have access to it. We use like Art Song Central or Art Song Database. It's all out there, and people have, categorized it for us. They have already done this work, and there is still this pull. There are many reasons why that we don't have to get into necessarily, but there is still this pull to do standards and to do the same things over and over. Even within the realm of underrepresented music, we still find like the same or like similar pieces that people have gravitated towards, maybe because there's already a recording that they could work from out there. So we knew we wanted to kind of do this array of composers that were kind of new to us. And actually, like, this wasn't necessarily in my mind when we picked the composers, but they all kind of overlapped in dates, which is fascinating to me because the styles are so different. Like, if you listen to the program with that in mind, you almost can't believe it. Like, Massenet kind of overlaps with Florence Price, which is crazy to me. So that wasn't necessarily like in my mind for the theme of the program. It was something that I kind of found out after, but I'm really glad that happened because you can see all the different styles. I mean, Rebecca Clark is someone who has done, I think, more in the instrumental realm, viola. She has a lot of viola and piano music. And her songs, I think I maybe have worked on one or two. And she has this huge output. And Florence Price has this huge output of songs. And I think she's one of the Black composers that is now being done a little more. I know Loft Recital has programmed her music and not just her songs. There's so much of it. But still, like, in an academic program, the fact that like more of this music is not done or even not talked about beyond kind of like the footnotes in a class is really a disservice to people. I mean, people should also, I think, explore more on their own, but that could be encouraged more in academia, I think.
Yeah, I studied art song 4 semesters between undergrad and graduate, and we never talked about Florence Price or Rebecca Clark. No knowledge of them at all, which is really sad because the songs are stunning. I mean, people are going to hear them. They're incredible.
They are gorgeous and they're not long. You do have to be careful like when you pick them, but I feel like more people should be doing this anyway on their own.
When you say careful when you pick them, what do you mean by that?
With someone like Florence Price, for instance, like a lot of her poetry comes from Langston Hughes, which is very rich in Black culture and the Black experience. And so I remember even at the very start of our journey, like Kara had wanted to do Song to the Dark Virgin, which is a popular one of Florence's. I see it. That is one of the ones I do see on YouTube a bit. And then we read the text more deeply. And for those of you listening, you should just go and read the text yourself and come to your own conclusions. There's nothing in it that necessarily says like, if you're white, you shouldn't sing this. So we had to come to that conclusion on our own. But there's so much music that is not necessarily about the Black experience, but it does require you to also kind of do some digging on who the poet is. I don't know, people should pay more attention to poets. I've had a few professors in my life at the U of M who like specifically talk about poets. Adriana Zavala was one of them who really, really cared about that. But especially for modern music, like if you want to explore more Black composers, transgender, like there's all kinds of, of music out there. You do need to be more mindful of the poet as well and the kind of experience that they are singing about when you pick that music.
What are some projects you think about doing in the future?
This is a great question. I feel like this COVID time has really given me the chance to kind of sit back and think more about what I want to do and how I would like things to go, which as a collaborative pianist, often I'm picky over the projects I take. I'm not often thinking about creating projects, if that makes sense. So I have a tendency, I think, sometimes to wait for things to be given to me instead of creating them for myself. With that kind of temporarily gone or not as available, I've had this time to really sit back and think like, what do I want to do? Like, how do I want like my personal business to go? And so the home recording studio has been one of those things, and just getting more familiar with tech and equipment and audio engineering and just wanting to offer people more, like convenience, feeling like, you can book one space and wanting to offer people that comfort to where they can sing their very best. So that's been one thing. I would also like to start more creative projects for myself. And one of these that I hope to start at some point is some kind of like cabaret series recital for the whole year. This is maybe down the line. Even with all the wonderful small companies in town, I don't quite see, maybe Loft Recital comes the closest to a company that's like offering a wide array of music and composers. And I know there are others, but I guess I would like to do kind of more of a neighborhood recital series, like a series that's not necessarily tied to one venue, but a series that like brings this music to communities. Art song, like the beauty of art song is that I don't know, I think it can even make more of an impact on people when it's outside of a big recital hall. So that's kind of something I would like to do at some point. And I think when COVID is past us to the point where we can gather safely indoors again, it'll be a little easier to do that. But I would like to create more art song opportunities for artists too, since it's not really where the money is. And I think that's why a lot of this music just flies under the radar. And I think that's really sad. So I'd love to create more opportunities for artists to curate their own programs.
I have to say, one of the things that we were really emphasizing with starting Oops is giving artists their own artistic freedom, because as we've said before, like a company hires somebody to do something under somebody else's artistic direction, and you're hired for something very specific, and you don't get to really choose. I mean, of course you make your own character choices on stage or whatever, but that's still underneath somebody else's artistic direction. And we focused so much on the singers in that respect because we all have our voice types and we get pigeonholed into certain types of roles. And I'm realizing now that, of course, for collaborative pianists, your hands are equally tied, so to speak, in that you only really do the things that are brought to you by others. So if you were to pick something to perform regardless of who you do it with, like don't even think about who the singer is or who the other instrumentalists are, is there something that you were just dreaming of performing someday?
Oh, that is such a hard question. There's so many things.
It doesn't have to be one thing, just anything that comes to mind. It doesn't even have to be the top one.
Man, this is so tough. I would really love to do there's so many operas even out there that are like smaller scale operas that a big company isn't maybe going to want to do under normal conditions. I know companies are doing things like La Voix Humaine because they can kind of stage that right now with COVID, but I think under like normal conditions, these smaller works often don't get done because there's like not enough people or whatever, the donors don't want to hear them. So I think I would love to do some kind of project down the line that's like maybe a 3-person, 4-person opera. There's so many. Telephone is one of them, like 2 people, Menotti. And maybe some people find Menotti cheesy, but I think it would appeal to people who don't want to sit down for like a whole big production. But you could do like 2 singers, pianist, in a room in someone's house, and you could sell seats, 30 people, and have it be this intimate experience and have it be almost more like a chamber opera. So I would love to do kind of projects more like that. People who don't even know that they love opera or don't love like the 3-hour-long affair would be maybe more easily persuaded to sit down for something like that and would really enjoy it.
We were talking to a potential artistic advisor who was going to join our network. They were very clear. They're like, I just want you to know that I don't like opera on a grand scale. I go into a theater, it does nothing for me. If that's what you need to be a part of Oops, I just want you to know, like, I'm not that person. And we're like, oh, we can't raise that kind of money, number one. Number 2, we don't want to do that. That's what everyone else is doing. We want to give money to artists to create those projects that they want to do. A 1-act opera or an opera with 3 to 4 people is totally feasible. And I think a way that people can really relate to experiences they've never considered before and stories. And I know Tina and I also struggled how we named this organization because there really isn't one term that applies to the umbrella things that are involved with classical singing. You have opera, you have art song, you have oratorio, and you have chamber operas, you have chamber music. I mean, there's a cappella music. I mean, there's a lot within that. So we're kind of hoping opera oriented is like singing and storytelling. Like that's what we want. And that's what we're looking to help fund and create, because that is the building blocks of opera. Without those two things, it's not that. And all of those other things that involve singing have both of those components to it. Even if it's a song that's 2 minutes long, it's telling a story.
Yes, yes, and I love that because it's like a testament to, I mean, even in an area like the Twin Cities where there's so many companies doing so many wonderful things, it's like there's still room for all these other projects and stories, and there are wonderful spaces with which to do it in. And I think if people want the kind of change that I hope comes to like bigger companies, like this is the way it has to start, I think, from like kind of grassroots and individuals supporting individuals, and making the change happen that way.
We've touched on this a little bit, but what do you think are some of the major problems in the industry right now, or, you know, hurdles that you've personally faced?
I can only pick one.
No, you can't whip out that list, girl.
This could be another long answer. But I guess I could start the conversation by kind of piggybacking off on what I just said, with like out even like naming names or companies or whatever, because I don't want to get into all that.
We don't want that either.
Woo! But that's actually some of it too. I think one of the problems, and I kind of experienced this as young artist. I was young artist at a few opera programs, like kind of while I was doing my doctorate, and I think people have this very, like, it's a rational fear that if they are perceived as the outspoken person, kind of speaking against injustice, like low pay, too many hours to the point where it's unsafe, sexual harassment, which I did see as a young artist, that, oh, if we're the outspoken person, we are the one who is going to get blacklisted. And our career is the career that's going to be affected by this. Like, I was a young artist at a program and I saw this happen, and the higher ups were not quick enough or outspoken enough, in my opinion. And so people felt like they couldn't speak up. That is the problem. The change has to come from the top. And I think our field moves so slowly that hopefully that will happen. And I've seen some bigger companies starting to form like advisory committees, which is wonderful. More people have to speak up and actually make change beyond, you know, like the current movement and trends for it to be a permanent thing. So that's one thing.
That's a huge one too. And I think you always have the fear of that when there's such a disparity in power dynamics. You have to make sure that the, you know, people in power aren't using that to their advantage, even when it's an assumed power. Like in any interaction that you're coming with, there is a power dynamic at play. And so there, you have to be aware of any implications that you might be presenting to people. I mean, it is such a charged and dangerous issue, and one that I know I have struggled with, and I've seen other colleagues struggle with as well. And I don't really have a solution for it except being able to have conversations about it and a safe place where you can address those concerns, even if it's not immediately to people up in the organization, but someone close to you who can offer advice. Because sadly, I think we've all experienced some sort of semblance of sexual harassment or, you know, inappropriate power dynamics in a professional environment.
Yeah.
The nepotism within the system doesn't help at all, because, you know, I worked recently with a company that was like, they're like, if anything like this happens, please talk to us. We want to help. But if you approach them about, oh, like a friend of theirs that they hired is exhibiting this sort of behavior, the answer tends to be, I know them. They would never do anything like that. And then it goes nowhere. So just to piggyback on your answer and add to it, that's also something that contributes to the issue.
Yeah.
But often it's like the charming people, like, that are also, I don't know, up to no good on the side. But they're charming to the people they need to be charming to, and they're very careful about how they show that kind of thing.
Anything else that you perceive? Do you want to add on to this negative?
I think now it's finally falling out of favor, but this idea that soloists have about this field that, oh, if you're an accompanist, and often they don't even know what a coach is, or maybe they've played a show as a rehearsal pianist and they don't know how to talk to singers, and I think singers are crazy. But this idea that if you're an accompanist, you're like a failed soloist, or that you're taking a cop-out. With the new degree programs, that's becoming less of a thing, but I still kind of see it. I don't know. I think the fix for this is maybe a little more possible, and I do see it happening where, I mean, if you're an undergrad now, there's more opportunities for chamber music and for accompanying. It's like, I don't know, it's tricky because often in an undergrad situation, like you're an accompanist because school doesn't have enough and they're just kind of running you into the ground. And that's often people's association with what it means to be an accompanist. And they're not brought into it necessarily with this idea that it's this whole field, which I think is a disservice to pianists just starting out. There's so many of them. And I was one of them. And my teacher in undergrad, he was wonderful, but he was a little more old-fashioned, and he made sure I had chamber music opportunities, and I was shy, so I didn't pursue it myself on my own in my undergrad because I didn't really know how to or how to even approach it. I wasn't outspoken enough. But he didn't really do that either. And it wasn't part of our core curriculum even. We had one accompanying class, and so maybe I played with a singer once through a class. But otherwise, there were no real opportunities built into the program for pianists other than like, go practice for 12 hours. Which I think is kind of a disservice to pianists. It's so hard to make a career as a soloist if you don't win a million competitions. And even then, it's hard.
It's interesting. I've never heard that, but I also think it's because I don't really interact ever with concert pianists. Like, I wouldn't have had that comparison. All I work with are collaborative pianists, and I think they are the absolute best. So I have not been aware of that, like, perception of lesser than because of the collaborative aspect. But I see it as something so perfect for you because you are, even though you are like more reserved, once you get to know someone, you are so sociable and chatty, and you naturally just give and take so much in that rehearsal process. So I can't imagine you being alone for 10 hours. It seems like a waste of a whole another skill set that you have.
I knew, I think, as a young pianist that wasn't all there was. And that it was like, okay, I guess I have to pay my dues in this practice room. But it was so unfulfilling. And I wonder how many feel that way and just they feel like it's something they have to do. I knew it wasn't right for me, but I feel like that is kind of one thing that you had to figure out less for yourself as an undergrad, especially now that, I mean, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about that. It's like school is only meant to do so much for you, you know, like, and some of it you do have to do your own journey and soul seeking, but I wish there was like some courses at least for people and, you know, different kinds of pianists, even violinists. Like, here are all the careers like out there that are, you know, that are possible now. And here's what you have to do to start, you know, molding yourself for those careers. Like, I didn't even know what young artist programs were until I was interviewing for doctorate programs. Isn't that crazy?
It makes sense though, because so much has changed in the time period of us being educated. I entered college in 2008, and that's when the economy collapsed. And that was the biggest changer for the arts industry, the arts sector, because before, companies were contracting 5 to 7 years out in advance. And overnight, they lost how much funding because of the crash. And they've never like fully recovered from all that. But the musicians are the ones who experienced it, because before you would have a good career doing regional work with a bunch of companies, but a lot of those folded and nothing has really come up in their wake. So these side hustles, which is what you're doing with your little studio too and your coaching business, have kind of naturally had to prop up because there was such a loss in income. But I commend you so much for your ability to keep learning and build something that's new, but also tangential to skill set that you already have.
It's what's been keeping me going, and my husband is my biggest supporter. So I'm terrible at self-advertising and self-promoting, just terrible at it. And he's my biggest supporter because he'll get on me and make sure, well, he'll offer to help me write emails, you know, and at least just edit them for me. I don't know. Sometimes I just need like that extra little kick, like, all right, like you don't need to second guess this, like just send this email. So it's nice to have a champion in him too.
I think we all need that, and I'm really glad that Mike is doing that for you, because you deserve it. You're amazing, Carson, and we want to, support all the great people in this community.
Thank you. And that's why your organization is so wonderful and going to do so many wonderful things for so many people. It's like, I think often I'll have these ideas and I'll be like, I know there's grants out there, but it's like there's so much. There's so much out there that sometimes it's hard to know where to start and how to get started. And you're really helping to fill that void. It's like you're not just one company limiting yourself to maybe one thing. You're many things to many different people.
Or for the artists, I would say. Tina, do you have any follow-up questions before we run into our rapid fire question round?
I do have one follow-up question. This is going back to the those who can't do a company question. The term collaborative pianist it's relatively new. I did an interview with the lovely Margot Garrett, and she was saying that at Juilliard they were trying to come up with a term, and one of her colleagues looked up the word collaborator, and one of the definitions was one who colludes with the enemy.
I've heard that definition before.
But I guess my question is, do you feel that the term collaborative pianist legitimizes what you do, in like to the concert pianist perspective and to the world, or do you like the term accompanist, or do you just prefer pianist?
This is such an interesting question. I feel like I've gotten into this discussion with a few people who think it's kind of ridiculous. Like, oh, collaborative pianists, like we're all just pianists. Like when you're a violinist working with a pianist, you don't call yourself a collaborative violinist.
I'm a collaborative singer, thank you.
I'm not.
Sienna sings a cappella.
I don't help. I hurt.
It's like even the word accompany like means to go with, right? So it's like it doesn't mean anything bad or negative on its own. I feel like it's the people who I've seen that word misspelled so many times. Like people don't even bother to like look it up. If I could be called anything, I mean, pianist, I'm a pianist, like pianist and coach. I mean, I feel like that covers everything, but I guess it's true, like not all pianists are collaborative pianists. I think that probably is where the word comes from. I do feel like it covers the most things without you having to like go into this whole long spiel. Like, because I don't see accompanist. I mean, I feel like that would be kind of silly, like to call your program like a degree, like, oh, I have a degree in accompanying. From that, I wouldn't necessarily be able to discern like if you're a coach or if you're a collaborator, because I guess. But I think it more comes from like this old school like opinion of pianists. If you have an opinion, we don't necessarily want to hear it, or we won't ask for it. I've been in many situations like that where I'm in the room and people will be talking about this musical idea and my opinion won't be consulted or asked for. And it's like, in that kind of context, I do feel more like an accompanist. Like, oh, I'm here to just be, like hands in the background and not really have an opinion.
And to clarify, do you coach singers or do you coach pianists as well as collaborators?
That is such an interesting question. I coach mostly singers. I have kind of thought that it would be wonderful to be more of like a coach to pianists, like young pianists kind of in similar positions to me, like starting out wanting to do chamber music but not knowing what to do. And I've thought about offering things like this. I guess it goes back to the being afraid to self-promote and self-advertise. Like, how would I even go about advertising this thing? I would have to start out by, I don't know, giving talks at conferences and things like that. Like, here's this whole other thing that you could offer your students. Like, oh, this is not something that I do as a teacher, but you could go to this person who could like help coach you. Because there's so many private teachers in town. And I think that would be a great way as a young pianist if they would be looking to play more with singers, violists, like find studios in town and see everyone is looking for pianists. But yeah, I do think that would be really wonderful to do, to kind of help give back to younger people who are just as lost as I was.
Well, and to help coach other duos on how to work together as duos. These are the questions that you guys should be asking, pay attention to these sorts of things. So there's a lot more to explore in coaching than I really ever gave thought to, because there are so many different relationships that can be explored within that dynamic.
There really is. It's kind of fascinating. Like, here's, the kind of language you need to use to talk to your singer. I don't know. Yeah, it's like there are all these little skills, and I'm sure the field will keep changing too, which is fascinating.
We hope.
I hope so too. Hopefully it will change for the better. I really hope so.
If we're involved, it's only good from here, right?
I agree.
Tina, any follow-ups, or can I jump into rapid fire?
I'm ready for some rapid fire.
Okay, are you ready, Carson? These are like, one few word answers, whatever pops into your head.
I hope so.
We can edit if anything inappropriate comes out. So people would be surprised to know that you are...
I love video games. I would not call myself a gamer. That is too intense. But I do love video games. So there you go.
Want to throw out the names of a few that you've been enjoying lately?
I just kind of beat with my key played maybe, half. But we just beat God of War, and that's one of the best games I've ever played. So there you go.
Do you have any pre-performance day rituals or routines?
Pre-performance day. Sometimes I will have like a little glass of wine, like kind of post-meal to help me relax.
What are you doing in the minutes before a performance begins?
This is supposed to be rapid fire. My bad.
It's a long time ago at this point. Like we're talking 9 months. What did you used to do?
9 months. I kind of have like a stock phrase that I say to myself over and over that kind of works to help me calm down. And the phrase for me is in the keys, in the keys, in the keys, instead of like don't panic, which does not work, I think.
In the keys. That's very grounding. Did someone tell you that phrase, or how did you come up with that?
It's really helped me. It was one of Tim Lovelace's phrases to me, because that was what I needed to hear most when I was starting my doctorate. And now it's just become something for me that really helps me ground myself almost more than doing like breathing techniques. I don't think those really work for me. Sometimes the longer I do them, the more freaked out I get.
Well, good for you for finding a solution. So COVID restrictions are lifted. What is the first thing you do? And like COVID's gone. It's magic world.
Go to a movie theater. I should have said go to a concert, but I don't know. We probably just go to the movies.
Going to the concert is work. Like you'll go to work at the concert and then you go to the movie after.
It's true. But yeah, when COVID is lifted right away, hopefully there will be concerts immediately. But if there's no concerts immediately, going to the movies.
If you could give a duo recital with any artist, living or dead, who would it be?
Clara Schumann.
Great choice. What's one item on your bucket list?
When COVID is lifted, to travel abroad again, we'd love to see Ireland.
Good choice. What's on your nightstand right now?
3 books that I have not finished.
You remember any of the names?
One is Olive Kittredge, which is, I guess it's an author that my mom has introduced me to. So it's like her series of books and like they're short stories. And I think that's why I haven't finished it.
Easy to put down.
Yeah, but it's very good writing. I do recommend.
Olive Kittredge, got it. What is something that you are proud of?
Probably most recently is just my home studio.
I'm really proud of you too. You're doing a great job with that.
Thank you. I'm trying to put myself out there.
Yeah, we'll help you. Everyone, hire Carson. Do you have any advice for your younger self?
To not be easily discouraged.
That's beautiful. I feel like we all need that right now.
Older self too. I think that's just one of those life things.
Well, Tina, do you have anything else for Carson here today?
It's so lovely to hear you just speak so openly and candidly about all of these things, and it's just been such a treat to talk to you today.
Well, thank you both so much for having me. It's such a treat to be able to answer these questions in a safe space.